requesting taxes and bond proceeds for a permanent first mortgage loan of up to $22,247,000, maximum term of up to 40 years with an interest rate of up to 4.4%. To Clay Arsenal Apartments LP. This is an entity formed by Omni America LC, which is the developer. The buildings were originally constructed between 1880 and 1930. This is a 150-unit Section 8 development serving families. There are 25 scattered sites located in the Clay Arsenal neighborhood in Hartford. The property has had a troubling past, with the previous owner neglecting to address health and safety issues. 3 years ago, HUD terminated the rental subsidy contract with the former owner, and tenants were relocated. The current owner are affordable housing developers from Atlanta who purchased the property in 2018 for $8.5 million. They have reportedly invested approximately $3.5 million and were able to have HUD agree to reinstate the Section 8 subsidy for all units. So this is an occupied property now. There is a purchase and sale agreement stipulating a closing to occur before the end of the calendar year with a negotiated purchase price of $22 million. The seller does stand to make a significant return on the sale, and this is partially attributable to the risk associated with their original purchase when there was no HUD Section 8 contract associated with it, and the property was in substandard condition. In addition, the seller's reluctance to provide any additional extensions to the purchase and sale agreement indicates their ability to find another potential buyer. And the developer has also reported that 100% Section 8 properties are in high demand by real estate investors and cash buyers because they're able to stay financially stable through turbulent times in the market, such as a pandemic. The developer does propose to recapitalize the property utilizing TEB proceeds and 4% LIHTC, and the City of Hartford has provided a conditional approval of the pilot agreement. The scope of work includes renovation and replacement of exterior lighting, replacement and repair of roofs, paving and stripping of parking lots, replacing windows, apartment entry doors, upgrading building mechanicals as needed, and adding a new fire sprinkler system. The in-unit capital improvement includes new flooring, interior finishes, painting, replacement of kitchen cabinets as needed, countertops, bathroom vanities, sinks, faucet replacements. The security system will also be overhauled, and there will be a construction of a new community facility, which is approximately 2,200 square feet. The development team includes the developer, which again is Clay Arsenal Apartments. This is an entity formed by Omni. Omni is a vertically integrated company comprised of 6 operating businesses that include development, property management, maintenance, construction, security, as well as LIHTC syndication. Omni does have a demonstrated track record of transforming properties from underperforming and distressed buildings into revitalized assets. They have acquired and developed 80 properties totaling 17,000 units of affordable housing. The developer does not have any properties in the CHFA portfolio, but they have completed a number of similar projects in neighboring states, including recently a project they did in Rhode Island known as Barbara Jordan Apartments, which is similar in size and scope. It was a 193 unit scattered site project with a 100% HAP contract. The GC is Renewal Construction Services, and they have completed several acquisition rehab deals similar in size and scope. And their experience includes 11 projects in neighboring states, and they have provided letters of good standing from suppliers. They do have a COVID-19 safety plan in place as well. Reliant Realty Services is a full-service property management company, and they manage more than 14,000 units across 6 states. They don't currently manage any properties in CHFA's portfolio. However, CHFA Asset Management has conditionally approved the management company. The project architect is Union Studios Architecture and Community Design. They're based out of Rhode Island, and they have done numerous projects throughout New England, more than 4% and 9% live tech projects in Rhode Island within the past few years alone. We did check the HUD debarment list and the D&B reports and have noted no concerns. HUD did report good experiences with the developer, particularly with turning around troubled assets. And we did contact Rhode Island Housing, and they reported having no concerns with the development team and stated they were responsive during construction and also absorbed change orders. Again, the location is in the Clay Arsenal neighborhood in Hartford. Nearby amenities include the library, the police department, pharmacy, bank, the post office, schools, as well as St. Francis Hospital. As I mentioned, the property is currently occupied. With regards to the financial structure of the project, they will be seeking a permanent CHFA loan. The loan will be fully dispersed at closing and begin amortizing immediately. We'll establish a loan proceeds escrow account for the permanent loan and advance the funds based on approved expenditures. We do have a third-party appraisal that valued the property at 23 million. While the loan to value ratio is at 97%, the size of the proposed loan meets the CHFA procedures, guidelines, and eligibility criteria. We did look at ways that we could reduce the loan to value ratio, and there were two primary limiting factors that prevented us from doing so. The first was the project meeting the 50% bond test, and the current percentage of financing with TEB proceeds is 54%. And if that falls below 50%, the available tax credit equity would be reduced by half. The second limiting factor is that this loan is beginning to amortize immediately to take advantage of the HUD mark up to market higher subsidy amounts. So in many developments, we're able to meet the 50% bond test with the construction financing side, which wouldn't impact the loan to value, but we weren't able to do that with this deal because they're amortizing right away. The developer will be seeking to renew and extend the existing 20-year Section 8 contract for all 150 units. There is no
that
temporary
financing works. I mean, we're funding 100% of the loan proceeds and then allocating or advancing those funds as work gets done. So we have a list of work that needs to be done. And so our loan to value until it starts to amortize is going to be 93%. And because the appraised value is as completed or as is?
Is as completed.
Okay, so it doesn't, it'll slowly go down, but not at any appreciable amount because amortization, it's over a 40-year schedule, 30-year schedule, right?
Yeah, it's over 40.
40, okay, so it doesn't, it's all interest up front. So I don't understand the 50% bond point and how we would get to that point or not get to that point.
So the 50% bond test is based on the eligible basis. And so we need to spend, the TEB proceeds need to be at least that 50% of the sources. And right now we're at 54%.
I think what Colette is saying, sorry, I can hear myself if there's an echo, but that the loan amount is meeting our requirements based on loan to cost, but exceeding our requirements with respect to loan to value. We don't have a lot of concerns because this is a fully project-based vouchers, asset that we think can, the operations will be strong. The issue with the loan amount and the 50% test is that in order for it to trigger the 4% credit, we actually have to issue bonds that meet at least 50% of the eligible basis of the project, which just means like the construction costs, and I think it's, includes land, right, Colette?
I believe so. I think maybe the number that would help. So the total TDC of the project is 42 million. So when that, again, there are things that are taken out of that for the denominator for the 50% test. So the numerator is the loan amount, which is the 22,247,000. So that's where we kind of get to the 54%. As opposed to the loan to value, which is based off of the appraisal amount, which then is much, is that 97%. Is that maybe helpful in those
Yeah.
two?
Yeah, that's the confusing
percentages?
part. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, just getting back to where I was here. So again, I think I was talking about how we typically are able to work with the TEB, the 50% bond test, meeting it with the construction financing, but we have that limitation with the structuring of this project. So we weren't able to do that with this deal. I mentioned that they'll be seeking the renewal of the Section 8 contract for 20 years. There's no relocation planned. However, we did budget for some temporary relocation in case that's needed on some of the units that will be ADA equipped. There's several strengths associated with this project. The development team does have a proven track record of doing these projects and acquiring and rehabilitating occupied projects and turning around troubled assets. We'll be adding the community building. We're preserving existing affordable housing asset. This project does provide a significant supply of larger 3, 4, and 5 bedroom units to the area. This transaction will also address the physical needs of the property, and the asset will become part of the CHFA portfolio, which will help to make sure that it's maintained in accordance to our standards. There are some challenges with this project as well. Although we have an experienced development team, they have not worked in Connecticut or with CHFA. We've discussed the loan to value ratio and the 50% test. We will be working with the team with an expedited closing towards the end of the year. There are some current, in any developments these days, there are challenges related to labor shortages and material cost increases, and that's the challenge for any project right now. In addition, based on some initial environmental testing, there are some additional testing that we've asked for follow-up on. So we've asked for some additional PCB testing in 2 of the buildings and some additional lead and water. We're still awaiting some of those results back. I can tell you just the other day, we did get initial reports that there was PCBs were not detected, but again, we need to run that through the LEPs. With regards to the mitigating factors to these challenges, with regards to the development team not having worked with CHFA before, they have engaged with a closing attorney who has worked with CHFA on many transactions. With regards to the loan size, there are many public benefits, which we've discussed with regards to improving living conditions and addressing the environmental hazards, the community center and the larger size units. With regards to the mitigating factors addressing financial risk of the loan, we do have the 20-year project-based Section 8 contract, which will help the financial stability of the project and ensure adequate cash flow to meet the debt service. The size of the loan does meet our debt service coverage requirements. In addition, the tax credit partnership has a significant contribution of over $6.5 million. So they will, this will help to ensure their continued involvement and investment, particularly in the first 15 years of the partnership, when the risk would be the highest. We do have the City of Hartford 15-year pilot commitment, which will also help ensure financial stability of the project. With regards to the 50% test, in case of any cost increases, The developer will be executing a agreement with the investor, which would stipulate that they would be required to lower their developer fee in order to meet that 50% bond test. With regards to the short time frame, we will be commencing closing calls immediately after board approval. And with regards to supply chain issues and potential cost increases, the developer and the GC have been in active construction on several similar deals in the Northeast throughout the pandemic, and they do have good relationship with vendors. We're not expecting any additional issues with cost overruns or anything like that at this point, but they would be fully funded by the contingencies or the developer fee. With regards to the environmental testing results that were not yet available, what we did ask the development team to do is to have their licensed environmental professional provide us with a worst case scenario cost estimate. That cost estimate came in at $412,000, and we've discussed with the developer either having that placed in an escrow held by Chfa or having it incorporated directly into the development budget. So these are something that we're still working with them on, but we wanted to kind of make sure we understood what the worst case scenario was. There'll be various closing conditions on the things that we've talked about, the Section 8 contract, the pilot, the funded escrow if it's needed, the developer agreement with the investor that will stipulate that they will lower their developer fee if they need to meet the 50% test. And there will also be a completion guarantee. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Well, one question I have is, this is a large project. We don't have any direct experience with the team. So there's three really critical members: the developer, the builder, the management company. There's more, but those three, have they worked together?
Yes, they're actually all associated entities. So Omni is, these are all subsidiaries of Omni. So yes, they all work very closely together. And I believe the principals, just want to check my language here. Yeah, they're all owned by the same indirect principals as the developer. And that includes the LIHTC investor as well.
So we will do some due diligence on other maybe HFAs who have done business with them, so we know that they're competent and, you know, straightforward, all that.
Yes, we did reach out to Rhode Island Housing, and they had a very good, they reported really good experiences working with them. And again, it was a very similar project. We also had contact with HUD, who also, you know, expressed that they've had a really good working experience with these entities in other states, in multiple states, and particularly on projects similar to this.
Anybody else have questions?
Paulette, when you mentioned the environmental issue and you put like a price tag of around 450,000 as being a target that you're talking about, and then you talked about the closing conditions, do we plan on having that built in, the coverage and the dealing of any potential environmental issues with closing conditions?
Yeah, so ideally, that will all be known. You know, that's what we're targeting, to have those things known before closing. We just couldn't get it in before the board action. So what we did was to just really understand what the worst case scenario is. But again, we're hoping that all of those things will be known. If for some reason there isn't something that has been finalized by that point, then we would be looking to set up some sort of escrow account that Chfa would hold for our, you know, comfort level to proceed if there was, say, anything that was still considered an open item.
We used to have those escrows because it is tricky, the timing, but we used to do least 1.5 times the worst case costs, just in because environmental can get away from
Mhm.
us quickly. And I don't know what kind of issues, whether it's the lead paint or PCBs or whatever. So I don't know. I'd rather see it in an escrow than as part of the loan budget, because again, or a contingent, or a subtraction, a subset of the contingency, because I think it keeps the management or the development team, focused on it. But that's from my experiences, I would look at it.
Okay, that's good feedback.
Heidi, this is Lisa. Just an additional comment. We've had a couple of conversations about the fact that Hartford in particular has a challenging situation because there is an over concentration of affordable housing. On the merits of this project in isolation, it looks terrific. And Colette, you did a great job presenting, and you clearly did a lot of work to prepare to get here. So upgrading the facilities that exist, upgrading the housing for people who live there, that's all terrific in isolation. But we're spending a lot of money here to perhaps not make that very serious challenge in Hartford worse, but we're not making it better either. So I just, again, think we need to really think hard about what we're doing when we're investing to maintain a situation in Hartford that is problematic. I think Kylie maybe has a comment, so I'll let her.
I agree with everything you said, Lisa, and I was going to make some similar comments. Sorry, I have an appraiser walking around the house while I'm trying to focus on our dealing with my own real estate while talking to all of you. So I note that the city of Hartford had a study done back in 2019 that CERC performed for the city, and that looked at the concentration of deed restricted housing neighborhood by neighborhood in Hartford. And this neighborhood, Clay Arsenal, is 66% deed restricted out of the total number of units in this neighborhood. I should preface this by saying I'm going to abstain from voting on this today, not because I, like Lisa, think that this property needs to be upgraded. This is effectively, for a host of financial reasons, the only way to do that. I've met and talked to tenants and been in these properties myself. So I've had some interaction with this project as it moved out of its Section 8 and that whole thing, and the city pulling the tax abatement and all that process. So because I've had enough interaction with this project, I'm, for conflict of interest purposes, going to abstain from the vote. But I think it's important to know, for those of you that, had the privilege of hearing Richard Rothstein at our conference yesterday, this is one of those places where continuing to use tax credits and other sorts of subsidies has concentrated poverty and continued the trend of deep racial and income segregation in the state. And this neighborhood is probably one of the most concentrated in terms of both poverty and in terms of affordable housing in the state. I would hesitate to say, but I think with the 66%, and that includes voucher use and location-based deed restrictions. So, I agree with Lisa. I think it's something we really need to consider. The positives of this are the property's in horrible condition. It needs to be rehabilitated. The number of bedroom units is really helpful. One thing that we don't do in the state is 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, and there are a lot of families that need that. And so it's critical when we talk about preservation to specifically think about preserving units that have multiple bedrooms. They're harder to produce because of market conditions. But I think that it's important to know the market economics of what happens when 66% of a neighborhood is deed restricted. And so we have a lot of folks living in this neighborhood who are frustrated that there's not a grocery store. And the reason there's not a grocery store isn't because the city and the state wouldn't love to build a grocery store there. It's because no grocery store operator, when they run a market study, is going to determine that they can survive there and have that be a viable operation, that enough people have sufficient transportation to get there, all of those things. And there is a good amount of transportation here from a transit-oriented development standpoint. This isn't a bad location. There's a lot of bus lines running through here. But, when we were looking at this property and trying to think about, what it could be next, the reason that it can't be a market rate property is because the natural financing market, or the sort of the non-affordable financing market, as you would not finance this property, because the rents are too low in this area to underwrite the amount of rehab and work that needs to be done on the property, and the value of the property over the long term doesn't pencil that out. And so because in this state, we don't have any other form of way to subsidize this property and to do the rehab, because the natural market's not going to do that, the question comes with these properties over and over as they either reach the end of their deed restriction timeline, or in a situation like this, the contract gets pulled and we have to start over, is because there's no other financial options to rehab that. And we risk leaving people in really awful conditions. And there were some really awful conditions in this property. So I think until we as a state come up with a better tool for figuring out how do we rehabilitate housing without deed restricting all of these units for 30 years, we're going to continue this cycle. And furthermore, this affects the natural rental market in the area. And I think that's important to note too. In this particular neighborhood and adjacent neighborhoods, the affordable rents that will be set for this are actually higher than the natural market rate rents for 1, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms. So that's to say that the property that's not deed restricted is going for lower rents. And part of that's because the housing that is deed restricted and affordable is sometimes in better condition. And so then we have this cycle where the properties that aren't receiving subsidies, because they're so devalued, then cannot get the money that they need to then rehabilitate those properties. And so we have this cycle, right, that we've created by controlling the market in an area to the point where we're controlling 66% of the rents. So this is a sort of an ongoing long-term, process. And I've stood on the soapbox before, and I'm glad to hear Lisa echoing some of these same things. Our desire to have housing that's in transit-oriented spaces and to preserve housing is important, but we really have to look at the patterns of the way we've been doing this and what that results in. It results in more difficult market conditions for ordinary owners, homeowners, and other landlords. It results in a much difficult market for economics, for small businesses to survive, for other businesses to come in. And it makes it more difficult for schools when we concentrate poverty and concentrate kids who are dealing with, Richard Rothstein talked about asthma, that's one thing, but a whole host of other issues in neighborhoods like these. And so we really just need to be thoughtful. And I agree at this point in time, there's no other option. There's no other way to finance something here without deed restricting it. But I think this is a perfect example of why we need to really start considering other solutions for properties like this.
This is Masuda. If I can add some context in terms of this particular transaction. So we are not adding new units to this area. This is preservation of existing affordable units. And as Kylie mentioned, this development has larger family units, which is something that is appealing to be able to have available for the residents in the community. Secondly, we have looked at doing 4% new construction, mixed income. Those are just very hard to do. I mean, we are looking at some transactions that the board may see down the road, but just doing new construction, mixed income, 4%, those deals are just much harder to pencil out. The other component to this transaction is that, one thing that we learned during the pandemic is that Section 8 properties are essentially pandemic proof, because you have the Section 8 subsidy that payment is made to the owner regardless of what's happening in the market condition. These properties have become extremely marketable. And so we are just concerned that if this sale doesn't go through, this property could be sold to a cash buyer who may retain the Section 8 subsidy, but there's no assurance that they will invest in the property as what the tax credit doing is. The 16.5 million plus the tax exempt bond proceeds is going to, completely renovate this property, reposition it for long-term success for the next 40 years. And we know this owner has extensive experience in turning around these types of troubled properties. So, from our perspective, this is a good solution. And as we look at this particular situation in terms of preserving the long-term affordability.
One other question I have that's more related to the financing of the project. I believe, but I'm not 100% sure, and I was trying to look it up. There's a state law that limits the duration of tax abatements that municipalities can set at 7 or 10 years, if I'm recalling correctly. I'm not able to find it, but it might be something that the Chfa team wants to double check, because I know I ran into that when we were looking at tax abatements for these properties. Is that obviously a 15-year makes sense given the duration of the deed restriction period, but that there was a state law that prevented that. I know that some cities kind of just ignore that, but it may be worth double checking. I was looking for it quickly and wasn't able to find it. I may be wrong. I'll preface that, but it's been a couple of years.
We
I
can
just
follow
want
up
to
on
add that this is a very complex issue, because on the one hand, you don't want to reinforce patterns of segregation in a heavily subsidized neighborhood. On the other hand, you have housing that is in need of preservation. The 9% credit has been an engine for building new units, and there we're really trying to be purposeful and strategic about where those are located, and not, trying to locate them in areas of high concentration of poverty. So, I mean, I would welcome your thoughts going forward, because this is clearly, there's an economic sort of barriers to doing what we really would want to do, which is perhaps building new and then, reducing the subsidized percentages in neighborhoods like this. So how do you do that effectively without a credit? It all has to work from an economic perspective, and then you have to be able to replace units that you're taking away. So I think it merits a larger conversation, but I understand where you're coming from.
Totally. I don't
sorry,
think
go
there's
ahead.
a financial way to make it work with the current landscape of tools and financing things that we have. And that's, why I would support it if I wasn't abstaining. But I do, like you, I think it requires a longer conversation about some new tools and different financing techniques that we may need to start trying to create to tackle situations like these.
And I'd like to ask Nandini if you've had a chance to actually sit down with the mayor in Hartford and his team, and maybe have a really in-depth discussion about this set of issues, because it may require us to think very creatively about seeking specific bond funding, for example, that in Hartford could help to fill that type of financing gap that we're talking about. Or maybe there are other creative ways that we could at least seek to pilot in a next project like this, some type of solution. But what's frustrating is for at least the last 2 years, we have this discussion from time to time, and then we go forward with projects like this that have merits in isolation. This is a great project. I don't think either Kylie or I are questioning any of the work that Colette and Masuda have done on the merits in isolation. This is important, but we keep doing these things that extend the timeline of maintaining the situation as it is, and that in itself is a problem. So I'd like to think that before the next type of project like this in Hartford comes up, there might be an opportunity for some creative thinking and some strategizing. I think it's time that we start moving that direction.
We'll give it some thought. Thank you, Lisa.
Anybody else have questions? Can you hear me? Any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion to?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thanks, Greg. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, who was that? Wendy?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments, concerns? Okay, Shelley, you want to
Sure.
take the roll?
Wendy Clark,
Yes.
Heidi DeWingert,
Aye.
Kylie Goslin,
Abstain.
Salem Mascara Bruno,
We're all
Yes.
over the place here.
Lisa Tepper Bates,
Yes.
Craig Ugalde.
Yes.
Just one abstention.
Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda, I have the mortgage committee calendar. Which looks a lot like this year's calendar. Twist. There was. I missed the twist. What's the twist?
Yeah, Madam Chair, good morning, members of Mortgage Committee. I can talk a little bit about the proposed 2022 calendar. So in response to Mortgage Committee feedback to meet in advance of the board meeting, we went back and looked at our workflow to accommodate that request by modifying the 2022 calendar. And then as you're also aware, some of the current Mortgage Committee time conflicts with the Finance and Audit Committee meetings. Some board members in the past have also expressed in being able to listen to Mortgage Committee, and so we've not been able to accommodate that using the current schedule. So to that end, like I said, we went back and looked at the workflow, and so what we're recommending is to have Mortgage Committee convene 2 days in advance of the board meeting to review the Mortgage Committee materials for that month. The meeting would be, held virtually in most cases, and then the materials would continue to be posted on the Friday before the Mortgage Committee meeting. So for example, if you look at the upcoming calendar, the January Mortgage Committee meeting would be meeting at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, and then the board meeting would be at 10 o'clock, and then Finance Committee meeting audit would be at 9 o'clock. And this way, it would not only give Mortgage Committee the opportunity to, look at these deals a couple of days in advance, but give other board members the opportunity to attend Mortgage Committee should they choose to. So that's really it.
I see that. I know personally, for me, because I drive an hour and a half to get here, it would be less likely that I would come to a meeting because of the board meeting would typically only last an hour. So I don't know if that's the case for other people. It just means that we're going to do more Zoom and less in person eventually, but it's fine. Does anybody else, I saw T's in front of it. I didn't even look between Tuesday and Thursday. Anybody else have any comments or concerns about the calendar?
The only question I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
Actually, I was one of the persons that suggested a change based on a couple of comments from some board members to allow for participation on the Finance Committee. And the Mortgage Committee, we can do a Zoom meeting, receive the information, and then the board, we can come if we want to or do Zoom. Yeah. Alisa?
Yeah, thank you. The only question I wanted to raise is when we discussed this, the prospect of having the meetings on a time frame that wasn't the same day, we had thought about maybe having a little bit more space between them in case there was feedback from the Mortgage Committee that would lead to some type of revision of any of the materials for the board meeting. So this doesn't, I think, really accommodate that, or would put a lot of pressure on the staff to make any type of edits or changes, as opposed to, giving them a week or 2 weeks. So I just wanted to mention that, because that was part of how we thought about it in a previous discussion about the concept of doing something like this.
So I thought that the staff did take that in consideration, and they thought that 2 days would be okay if there are any recommendations for any projects. We can try 2 days and then we'll see how it goes.
Okay, anybody else? Do we have to approve the calendar?
Recommended go to board.
Okay.
You don't have to vote, but just recommended sort of a voice confirmation.
So everybody is in favor of sending the calendar and recommending approval of the calendar to the board. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next on our agenda are the minutes from the October 28th meeting. Anybody have any comments, questions, corrections? They looked okay to me. Do I have a motion to approve, to accept the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a
Second.
second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then last on my agenda is the multifamily activities report by Wendy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
9 preliminary applications have been received for the upcoming 9% tax credit round. And of those 9, 6 pre-application conferences have taken place. The other 3 will be scheduled in the near future. The preliminary application deadline is this Friday. And as a reminder, the 9% applications are going to be due January 12th next year. CHFA is also offering taxable bond financing for construction only, construction to perm, and perm only for developments planning to apply for the 9% round. And in addition, $1 million from CHFA's Opportunity Fund will be available to those applicants. And those applications are due at the beginning of December. For closings, there was 1 initial closing last month, Heverin Terrace, and 1 final closing, which was Armstrong Court, Phase 1. For overview sessions and workshops on the 10th of this month, CHFA and Spectrum held our semi-annual online webinar to present an overview of the allocation and compliance monitoring components of the tax credit program. Also on the same day, staff listened in on a free webinar that was hosted by the Connecticut Institute of Real Estate Management. And the topic was the new Connecticut marijuana law and what properties should be aware of. And taking place right now this week for 2 days, we have an annual conference that Connecticut attends with other New England HFAs to talk about hot topics in the asset management area. The states have been meeting annually for 32 years to share best practices and discuss common issues. We recently updated our Excel workbook that owners and agents use to submit their audited annual financial statements. A broadcast email was sent out to notify owners, agents, and CPAs of that change. For the HACCP program, only $4,300 remains now. So applications can still come in, but when that money's gone, then it's gone. And then again, we included a chart at the end of the report that highlights some of the upcoming projects that will be presented to board next year. Are there any questions?
Nope. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else? Okay,
So moved.
is there a
Second.
sec? Okay,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. All right.